This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome to the Elevate Construction Podcast, where we help anyone implement on their projects. My name is Jason Schroeder, and today's podcast is the first in a small series providing options and feedback requested by a business owner that was gracious enough to reach out. This one will be an introduction, and it will be about safety implementation on special or mid-sized projects. So first of all, I want to say that I believe that feedback is a gift. It really is, because it's the only way we're going to get better. It can be difficult sometimes, or maybe it's difficult all the time, especially if it's feedback for improvement. But feedback really is a gift. And I want to tell a little story about a holiday ham. And I heard this at church. I heard this at another leadership conference. I've heard this all over the place. And I just love this little story for the effect. And it basically goes something like this, that at a holiday party one time, there was a lady, a hostess, who had made a holiday ham, and she had served it, and the front and the end was cut off of it. And somebody in the party asked, "Why do you cut the front and the ends off of it?" And she said, "Well, basically, that's the way I was taught to do it by my mother. I don't really know. Let me ask her." And so she went and asked her mom, and her mom said, "Well, I don't really know. Let me ask my mom." And so basically grandma was asked, and when grandma was asked, she said, "Oh, I cut the front and the end of the ham off because it wouldn't fit in the pan." And so throughout the generations, the daughter and then the granddaughter were cutting off the ends of the ham needlessly, wasting really good ham, like the party goer had mentioned, for no really good reason, because, by that time they had bigger pans and nobody had asked the question. And here all of a sudden they find out they've been wasting that all these years. And it really was just because they had done things the same way since the beginning and had never asked the question. And so sometimes in construction, we have that same situation. So if we receive feedback, if I do, if you do, and if in this industry we're sharing concepts, I'm sharing these concepts on podcasts and through the business, and we're sharing it with each other, and we're giving each other feedback on LinkedIn, we're liking posts, we're commenting on posts, and we're helping each other learn, then we can keep the ends of our ham on our projects. What things are we doing just because we've always done them that way? So I hope you enjoy that little story. I've always enjoyed that little story wherever I've heard it. So why would you want to listen today? Do you want to know how to implement on special or mid-sized projects? Would you like to have operational control with only 1 or 2 or 3 people on site? If you don't have these big teams that these $50, $100, $150, $400, $500 million project team sizes have, do you want to know some tips and tricks that will work for you if you want to have operational excellence and, quite frankly, have the same results as some of these bigger projects? Then today's podcast is for you. I once heard a very respected general superintendent tell me these big projects have a tendency to kind of run themselves. And while that's not entirely true, and that's not entirely how he meant it, that really is a neat comment, because the people that are doing these smaller projects, these mid-sized projects, these special projects, really are getting kind of a harder situation in my mind. It can be really easy to get circled into a larger team, to even get lost a little bit. There's a lot of support there. There are different leaders. There are fallbacks. There are redundant systems. There are redundant checks. But on these smaller projects, you'll go through and get so much more experience on these smaller, special, or mid-sized projects than you will on the bigger ones. So if somebody says, "Oh, he or she is just a small project superintendent," or "he or she is just a small project PM," I would look at that and say, "Oh, they are a small project or special project PM or super. Wow, that means that they're going to have a lot of experience. They're going to have some grit. They're going to have seen more things than these large project employees or, construction managers, because they've been through it all. They've had to rely on themselves, and they've had to deal with difficult circumstances, where on a larger project, you have more fallbacks." So I really feel like there is a kudos, there's a, some praise, some credit that needs to be given to people that are in these situations, and especially the ones that do it well. So here's a quote: "Everything must be adapted to your circumstances on the project." And I want to start out with kind of a story here. It's kind of more of an overview than a story, but let me take it away. There was a $15 million project once that I was working on that was really high profile. So there was just enough money to get done what we needed to get done, but also there wasn't money to go do the typical things that we would do on a larger project, which would make it kind of that sustainable, large project, large team kind of a feel. There were only a couple of positions, supervisory positions on the site, one superintendent, and we really had to make that money go and do things on that project which would make it perform the same as we had on the previous $100 million project, but also be responsible with the finances, especially in this contract delivery method, especially with this customer. So we had to do things like implement safety. We had to make sure we had operational control. We had to make sure that things on site were delivered for the neighbors just like they had always been. And on this particular site, like I've said before, there was an adjacent cafeteria, an adjacent hospital. There were many different utilities running through the area. There was a vivarium nearby. It was in an existing facility. Students and campus members would go by the area, and it was connecting into an existing building and over an existing basement. So this was probably one of the worst situations there was to go build a new structure. And it was, quite frankly, kind of a complex structure there. So here are some of the brief things. I just want to go through an overview, a list of things that we knew we needed to do. So first of all, we were able to get some craft help. Number one, and we were able to charge that to the cost of work for certain scopes on the project, so they would also be able to help the project superintendent for a safety presence in the field and for coverage, quite frankly, if there was a family emergency or a doctor's appointment or something like that. We were able to get the offices so that it was in the existing building and it was less expensive, and we were able to mobilize the project manager there and have that project manager also work on other projects at the same time, but it also helped with safety coverage and having another person there to help with certain things throughout the day. The other thing, we were able to charge a field engineer to the cost of work and to reduce any outside third-party surveying, take away those budgets, only verify primary control, get rid of any need for continuous staking. We pulled staking and layout from any of the trade partners, and we trained this field engineer and also had that field engineer charge the cost of work for some self-perform. We were able to have a field engineer throughout the project, and that was remarkable, helping with quality, helping again with coverage, helping with operational control and safety. So there were a couple of things. We knew that we couldn't have a job site operationally stable and remarkable unless we had workers there that were safe, that were trained, that were oriented. So there was a requirement that they had to be OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 trained before they came to the project site, because if there are workers that aren't trained, temp workers that aren't trained coming to the project site, that increases the need for supervision, but we don't have that in the GC's GRs to go do that. We have a single superintendent. So we made sure that the OSHA 10 for workers and OSHA 30 for supervisors, for foremen, was a requirement. The other thing was orientation. We took the time in the beginning, we had some help with this, but we created an orientation which was specific to that project, took care of the adjacent neighbors and customers, oriented them, and then we standardized it and made it sustainable by having a test there that could be quickly administered by the lead superintendent or the field engineer. And so what was the reason for the test? Well, the answer to that is that we needed everyone to understand, not just to be told. And so if somebody didn't pass the test, they had to go back through their training, back through the recorded videos, and go do what was necessary to learn the information to pass the test. Why was it recorded? Because we need the superintendent out there with foremen, with superintendents in the morning preparing work, making sure that everything was stable. But we also need to make sure that orientation is given properly. So he would be able to set up workers 5-10 minutes before the worker huddle, go do that orientation, they would be in there with their foreman or with a lead man or with a representative from the company for about 90 minutes, and then they would have to take that test. And so the superintendent could get everybody lined out, answer some questions, come back to the office, check the test, administer the stickers, get everybody checked out, make sure that worker information forms were filled out and that everything was 100% ready to go. And that worked out well. And there were like 100 different things that we did on that project to make sure it was sustainable for a single superintendent. But I do want to just cover a couple of these, and that was one of them. The other thing, and this is typical for large projects, but everybody out on the project site had stickers for the things that they were trained to do. So they had to have their cards for forklift operation, but when it came to fall protection or confined space or for rigging or for excavations or for high-powered electrical work, people needed to have their training stickers on their hard hats. And after the orientation, the superintendent would administer those stickers so that he could go out there and make sure, just by observing the hard hat, verify training and verify the pre-task plan or the JHA if necessary, to make sure that those workers were ready to go and qualified to do that work. Also, there was a system where the foreman every day would check all pre-task plans by 8 a.m. in the morning. And he was trained to do that. Remember, he's getting charged to the cost of the work, but also able to help out with key things like that to make sure that everybody is starting their day in an effective manner. The other thing that we implemented on the smaller project, which wasn't any more difficult because it was a smaller project, was the worker huddles. And if we do those worker huddles like we did on that project, everybody is on the same page, heading in the same direction. The other thing is the schedule triggered that team for job hazard analyses that needed to be created and reviewed for high-risk work, and the schedule triggered steps along the quality process. So although there was one superintendent, it was aided by the project manager that was back at the home office or in the main office. The quality process for pre-construction meetings, for mock-ups, for first in place, for initial inspections, for follow-up inspections were triggered. Those JHAs, the preparation of those things were triggered by the schedule so that the team could help plan and prepare so that the superintendent wasn't caught off guard and needed to fight fires. Also, and this is probably the most difficult one, is that zero tolerance was implemented on the project site. Now, I personally don't believe that a single superintendent can keep track of safety like he or she needs to, unless you implement a zero tolerance system. Otherwise, the trades will get out of control, the safety will get out of control, and it just isn't manageable. And most superintendents, most contractors, most people in our industry will just kind of give up. In fact, the other day, I heard from a safety consultant that very same thing. They either get it under control or they end up giving up. And so we have to make sure that there's an accountability system, and a superintendent, if he does, 2 or 3 walks throughout the day, if there's a zero tolerance system, those trades will start treating him the right way, and it will become less babysitting, less corrective action, and it will become more of a proactive environment. One other example. There was a contractor grading system on site that ensured that all of the foremen were performing in their role, in a supporting role to the superintendent, whether that was the foreman safety walks or daily reports or being at meetings on time or making sure that the plans and specifications were reviewed before coming to work, or making sure that pre-test plans were filled out on a daily basis. This contractor grading system can make sure that the burden is taken off the superintendent from a babysitting standpoint and put back onto the contractors where it needs to be. And that will make for an environment where cleanliness, organization, and safety look just as remarkable as they can on a larger project. So let me go through a couple of things here, and I hope that this is helpful so far. A company must have these 19 things, and there's more of them, but they must have these 19 things for there to be the start of a good safety program in that company. And so I want to look at this list and then distill down some of the other things that have to be done on a smaller or mid-sized project from this list to make sure that we get the same results. So number 1, ownership participates in safety and holds people accountable throughout the organization. Number 2, ownership tracks safety metrics and reviews those metrics throughout the year to make sure that the safety program is working out on the projects. Number 3, There is a functioning safety leadership group that makes sure that the safety program is implemented and functioning. Number 4, corporate supports those functions and is involved with the safety program. Number 5, there's a good substance abuse program that ensures all workers coming on site that they have not abused any substances, that they are ready to go to work. They are physically and mentally capable of doing the work without a lot of babysitting from the project superintendent. Number 6, superintendents throughout the organization are held accountable for safety metrics and are asked for their feedback, and they are on safety committees and programs, and they regularly check in to make sure that anything that's happening as an organization is being moved forward in an effective manner. Number 7, projects have a really effective project orientation, and employees have a remarkable onboarding process, especially for self-perform employees, people that work for the organization themselves. Number 8, weekly safety trainings occur that are remarkable, or those might be called toolbox talks. But the best way to do this is to have a really intentional agenda, for that agenda and that toolbox talk to be filled out, to be signed by everybody, and for those agendas, those signed copies, to be emailed back to a safety task force that includes leadership and ownership on a weekly basis from all of the projects. Number 9, company leaders are continuously and effectively trained, and this might even be weekly. But superintendents, they have OSHA 30, they have first aid training, they have responsible person training, they have scaffolding training, they have rigor training. I mean, anything that needs to be trained throughout the company on a continuous basis, at least from an awareness standpoint, is continuously trained. Number 10, there's tiered escalation for near misses, for first aids, for on-site first aids, for off-site first aids, for recordables, for emergencies, for tier 3 incidents, for major incidents where somebody was injured, and for those incidents that are significant. Number 11, project emergency response plans are present on projects, and project sites are prepared to implement. Number 12, incident reporting is done properly at the right time, and root cause analyses are done within 48 hours. Number 13, there's an updated safety manual which can be looped in and used as a part of the quality process, to which trade partners are contracted, and from which specific items, processes, and practices and best practices and policies can be distilled from, used, sent, referenced on a continual basis, and it's consumable enough that it's not this long-winded, detailed policy that can't be understood. It's bulleted, it's implementable, it's usable. Number 14, the implementation of full PPE on project sites is remarkable and effective. Number 15, projects are clean and organized. Number 16, pre-planning is done for safety in the quality process, or in another way, ahead of time before activities and especially high-risk activities take place. Number 17, weekly safety walks occur and have an outside set of eyes, whether that's ownership or a safety manager or the safety director, on a continual basis. We are walking the project sites to get a second set of eyes. Number 18, there are morning worker huddles with the superintendent and all workers on site to talk about safety and to train daily. Number 19, there is an accountability system in place, whether that's zero tolerance or some other system. There is an accountability system in place where we can take the third of the people on site that aren't bought in and move them to the third that are bought in, and move that questionable, undecided group in the middle over to the bought in portion of people on the project site. And so this is a list of 19 things that a company has to have, the projects have to have, in order for there to be a really good start to a safety program. But let me give you 4 things that I look for with superintendents on site, and especially for special or mid-sized project sizes with a single superintendent. These 4 things have to be in place for there to be a good chance for there to be a safety culture on site with good morale. Number 1, afternoon foreman huddles, where that superintendent works with the other trade foreman, the other trade superintendents, to intentionally plan the next day in an effective manner. Number 2, morning worker huddles with everybody on site for the first 5-10 minutes of the project, training and communicating and creating a social group with all of the workers on site That has to be in place to create that culture, to create that positive environment, and we will get remarkable results from that if we do so. Number 3, a daily correction system takes place where 10 to 15 to 20 different safety observations can be taken in the quickest manner possible and corrected daily by either the on-site craft carpenter or laborer or the trade partners themselves. And then number 4, there has to be an accountability system on site. I personally like zero tolerance systems, but there has to be a way, again, to move the people on site that aren't bought in to actually do the things that we need them to be doing on the project site. So let me go on to the next section by saying that the situation in construction right now is that mid-size or special projects can be a lot harder than the large projects to implement safety, basically because we have less resources. There are less resources, there's less presence. If the superintendent is in a meeting, that reduces the ability to be in meetings, but while he or she is in a meeting, then there's a lack of presence in the field. The other situation is that trades are there for a shorter amount of time. It's harder to train them. It's harder to onboard them. It's harder to create a long-term culture, because like on a big project, you'll have the mechanical contractor, the plumber, the electrician, the framer. You'll have these folks from the very beginning, and they will help you implement and sustain your culture. On smaller projects, the situation is that the trades are there for a short amount of time. And we are going to discuss operational control of mid-sized projects with fewer resources. And so the industry norm is that we, not we or not you necessarily, but some people, and maybe it's you, maybe it's me, but we give up on implementing lean or implementing operational control or doing remarkable safety or remarkable quality because there are real concerns about resources and capacity. And I personally believe that the way to do that is to have better trained people, to have leader standard work, and to have standard systems that allows the superintendent to be effective in key meetings and not have to run around and babysit. And there's an accountability system there that gets people to do it. Usually the other industry norm is that people will bring up legitimate concerns, about how to create operational control or implement safety, but no one will really answer those questions or speak up about it. They'll just say, oh, implement the system, it works. Oh, implement the system, it works, without ever tailoring things to those project sizes. I'm talking about things like zero tolerance, or like the last planner system, or like tag planning, or like weekly work planning, or the huddle system, or any of these great lean concepts, these industry norms, these industry trends. How do we get them implemented on smaller, special-sized, mid-sized project sizes? Well, the answer is we need to realize what the real concerns are and answer those concerns. And the industry norm is we just have less resources, there's more turnover on these size projects, and there's less interest and motivation by trade partners because they know they're going to come to that project and immediately leave. So let's talk about some solutions. The solution in my mind, and I've created 15 here for everybody, and I'll talk about each one of them for you, but let me first go through them. Number 1, modify work orders. Number 2, spend some more money on bathrooms and lunch areas for the workers. Number 3, spend a little money on trailers and signage to create environments that support the project site and the superintendent. Number 4, get a carpenter or laborer helper that can be charged to the cost of the work for some scope on the project. Number 5, get a great orientation system on the project that is recorded and tested. Number 6, require a good system to identify safety training on site so you know what people are trained for. Number 7, begin afternoon foreman huddles. Number 8, begin morning worker huddles. Number 9, begin a group me text system with your carpenter on site and with your trade partners so that you can maintain good communication and follow up on assignments. Number 10, implement a quality process for pre-planning on your project site. Number 11, get your helper to check and do an audit on pre-task plans, on JHAs, and on permits on a daily basis. Have the superintendent focusing on the high-risk areas and JHAs on a daily basis. Number 13, permits are issued in the afternoon foreman huddle the day before and signed before going to work the next day. Number 14, implement zero tolerance on the project site. And number 15, grade contractors on site to make sure that everyone elevates to the situation, everyone rises to the occasion, and we have standard acceptable behaviors on the project site that are understood and implemented. So let me go through these one by one. Number one, modify work orders. The reason that I talk about this is that we have to have contractors bought in and contracted to these certain scopes. How many times have we gone to a project site where the scaffolding contractor was not contracted to be tied off during erection and dismantle? How many times have we gone to a project site where these contractors didn't know they had to attend certain meetings? How many times have we gone to a project site where they didn't know the safety expectations? So whatever things we're going to implement, we need to make sure that it's an exhibit in the work order and the work authorization and the contract somehow, to make sure that that's a contractual obligation and that it's known ahead of time. Number two, spend some more money on bathrooms and a lunch area. If the superintendent on a special or mid-sized project is going to have the kind of operational control that he or she needs to have, then we have to win over the workforce and have really nice conditions. It might cost $5,000, it might cost $3,000 or whatever, but we need to make sure that we have nice bathrooms, have them cleaned at a higher frequency, have a lunch area where the people can be taken care of. If there's cold weather, let's have an area where they can stay warm. If there's hot weather, let's have an area where they can cool down. Let's make sure that we build some goodwill with the workers, with the foreman on site. Otherwise, the rest of these systems don't work. Number three, spend a little money on trailers and signage. We need to make sure, please, that we at least have one trailer with a conference room where we can have these afternoon foreman huddles, where we can do orientations, where we can have a large screen, and where there's signage inside that site that helps the team to function at a high performing rate, and that we also have planning boards in there, we have lean systems, we have site logistics maps, we have the things in there that we need to have. Number four, get a carpenter or a labor helper that can be charged to the cost of work for some scope, and then that person can help out. Those people need to be trained. They need to have a phone. They need to be included in any of the tech systems, and they need to be trained, whether it's OSHA 10 or 30. They need to be trained for first aid CPR. They need to have the right qualifications to be a responsible person so that they can go oversee work. Now, if the lead superintendent will train this person and give him or her a detailed checklist of things to do daily and constantly coach and mentor, then this helper can make the difference so that that superintendent isn't burned out, isn't working too many hours, isn't having to skip doctor's appointments, can't help, their husband or wife at home in certain situations. If this helper is on site, then there can be coverage. You can also do this with a field engineer. Number five, get a good orientation system on site that is recorded and tested. There are studies that show the longer and the more in-depth and more valuable an orientation is for safety, the more that incidents, that recordables, that time away from work, that days away from work, that these serious injuries reduce because workers are better oriented to that project site. And the reason I say have it recorded is because you need to have good information there. They need to be tested to make sure they understand. And it can't be that a superintendent is spending 3 hours out of every day or one day in a week orienting people. There has to be a standard system there. Number six, require a good system to identify safety training. We need to make sure that if we walk up to somebody on a ladder, or we walk up to somebody that's using fall protection, or we walk up to somebody that's a competent person in an excavation, we have to be able to quickly identify if they're trained to do that task, because people should not be doing tasks for which they're not trained, they're not certified, they're not competent to perform. Now, number seven, begin the afternoon foreman huddles. Now, let me start out with this one by saying that I have noticed that a project has to have 2 out of 3 of a key meeting. There's the trade partner weekly tactical, the afternoon foreman huddle, and the morning worker huddles. A project site, a superintendent, a company has to have 2 out of 3 of those meetings implemented in order to have operational control on site. And for a smaller, special, or mid-sized project, I would recommend having the afternoon foreman huddles. Now, in that foreman huddle, you're going to gather everybody together in the afternoon when crews are cleaning up. You're going to get them in there. You're going to make sure that daily reports are all filled out. That's going to reduce the burden on the superintendent. We're going to turn those in. You're going to deal with roadblocks in that meeting right then and there. You're going to plan the next day on a visual. You're going to plan where the crane's going. What are the safety items for the day? What inspections do we have? what deliveries are coming and where do they go. You're going to plan everything for the next day and make sure that all of the foremen are heading in the same direction, that everybody sees as a group, knows as a group, and acts as a group together, which will reduce the load on the project superintendent greatly. So begin those foreman huddles, get everything down to a day plan, and then the next day, to prevent any miscommunication from foreman to workers and to create a social group and to line out expectations and to hold people accountable, do a 5 to 10 minute worker huddle with all workers on site with your bullhorn. Talk about things from the day's walk before that need to be done, that need to be cleaned up, that need to be corrected, behaviors that need to be corrected, circle in owner items, circle in things that you want to remind people, do a daily training session and build that rapport. And by all means, make sure that you ask the workers for feedback to get them more bought in and make sure that they feel listened to. If you will do this, you will create a social group on the project site and you will have remarkable results if you know how to authoritatively lead with influence. The other thing is, begin a GroupMe text system with your carpenter, your laborer, and then have a separate one for trade partners. Now, the key here is when you're walking in a day, you can find 5, 10, 15, preferably 20 items that you text out on this GroupMe system with pictures, real time, really quick. And you say, okay, so I need a set of steps here built. You'll send that to your carpenter. Hey, here's an entryway pile. I don't know whose trash this is. Can we get this cleaned up today? Hey, these bathrooms, the trash can needs to be emptied. Can you get that done before the end of the day? Hey, the trash chute needs to be emptied. Can you get on that before 11 o'clock? I've locked the trash chute. You're going to send observations to your carpenter, to your laborer to capture things and to correct things on that project site on a daily basis. The trade partner GroupMe text system would cover things like, hey, trade partner, on level 3 area A, we need this cleaned up. Please sweep before the end of the day. Hey, trade partner, we need to make sure that your materials are moved out before tomorrow because trade partner B is moving in, right? So if you get this culture where your trade partners have to respond to you in these texts in this GroupMe, it can be absolutely remarkable. Number 10. Implement a quality process for pre-planning. Large projects have the buyout meeting, the pre-mobilization meeting, the pre-construction meeting, the first in place mock-up, follow-up inspections, closeout inspections. At a minimum, come up with a rolling system on your project where you can do pre-construction meetings and at least get the crews lined out and communicated to in the field, and that your schedule triggers those things. Number 11, get your helper to check pre-task plans on a daily basis. So that means your carpenter, your responsible person, you say check every crew by 8 o'clock, English and in Spanish, to make sure that they have proper pre-task plans, proper planning. They're heading in a good direction before 8 o'clock. And if not, tell them to shut down. Tell them to go make sure that they get things done ahead of time and that they do the proper planning. Number 12, you as the superintendent on your project site, make sure that all critical job hazard analyses, that they are signed and checked in the morning before you go to work. Number 13, permits are issued in the afternoon foreman huddle. If you want to make sure that you're not running around making sure that you have the dig permit, that you have the hot work permit, and you're signing all these permits and running and fighting fires, then make sure that those permits are issued and filled out the day before with foreman, and that the next morning it's a verification and a check. The other thing I would recommend, if a superintendent, like if I was in charge of a special, small or mid-sized project, I would have a single point of entry on the project site, and I wouldn't let people through and out of that huddle unless I knew that they were signed ready to go. So here's how that would look. You would have your worker huddle and you would be like, all right, the framers, you guys are good to go. You just need a pre-task plan, clean up level 3, area A, you're good to go. The excavating company, you guys wait for me after this huddle. I want to review your dig permit. I want to make sure you have everything before you're ready to go. You guys stick around and make sure that you stay with me. And then you would go around and just do a double check to make sure that everybody has what they need, and it's a point of release. If you don't have a worker huddle collecting and gathering everybody that comes into a single point of entry on the project site, then you will have chaos, people showing up, doing whatever they want. Maybe they don't even have PPE on your project site. It will be absolute chaos. So please implement that. This is the toughest one. 0 tolerance. If they're not following the rules, they get sent home. If they're not clean, they have to clean it right away. If their delivery isn't scheduled, if it's not at the right time, it gets sent away. Zero tolerance. Stop babysitting. After a couple of days, the trade partners will get used to the system. They will appreciate it after 6 weeks, and you will stop babysitting, and you will go out there and you will see everyone has their PPE. Everyone has their pretest plans. Everyone is following the rules. Everyone has cleaned areas if you just stop tolerating it. Number 15. Grade your contractors. If you need work planned, if you need JHAs on time, if you need workers to have pretest plans by a certain time in the morning, if you need deliveries scheduled, if you need safety walks done on a weekly basis, if you need anything that would make the superintendent's life easier, start to grade those things on a weekly basis and publish those grades and get the owner of the company to help you out. That is the quickest way to get everyone to help out the superintendent. Otherwise, the superintendent has to go track down inspections. Otherwise, the superintendent has to go track down daily reports. He or she has to go track down to make sure they filled out their pretest plans, to make sure they're turning in their paperwork, to make sure they've planned their work, to make sure. But we need to stop doing that. We need to increase the capacity of the superintendent, reduce that load, and grade contractors and make them responsible for their work. And if a contractor is not performing, they're an F contractor, then the owner of the company really needs to look at, does that contractor belong doing continual business with us? So these are just 15 things. There can be more. These are the key things that I feel like have to be done on a project site in order for the smaller, special, or mid-sized projects to succeed. I hope this helps. The tips and tricks for this are that success comes from getting others to do what they need to do. That getting supers to lead this way takes immersive training and training that is life-changing, that will allow the super and train the super and get the superintendent to really hold people accountable to get to their heart. The key is to create standard systems on the site that will support that culture, meaning clear the path. And that we have to do weekly safety walks to raise that mental set point. We have to have somebody, whether it's the safety director, safety manager, owner of the company, doing periodic walks as a second set of eyes to raise the mental set point, the expectations of that superintendent project manager in the field. And then the last one I would say is that continuous follow-up is the key. We need to make safety a daily item under complete control and do it in ways that is the easiest for the superintendent. So the vision for this would be that any size project has remarkable safety, remarkable operational control in their projects, and that anybody can get it done. So please, if you are on those size projects, please reach out to me. I'm willing to help. I will help you. There are ways to do it. The vision for this would be that any size job has what they need, has the fulfillment, and that we do not burn out our supers on those types of projects. So until we meet again, please reach out to help. Please look at this list. Please decide, hey, do I need this? And if you do, let me know. We will go do remarkable things together. And I promise you, once you have your first project going, it will scale to all of the other ones. Until we meet again, on we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.